Welcome to Ask Sean, where I engage all sorts of questions about life, relationships, and being human. I'm Sean Slevin. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question that you'd like to pose to me, you can send it to me anonymously at www.asksean.org. So today's question has to do with relationships and needs and our relationship to our own needs. So I'm kind of forming the question. This is not a question that somebody sent in, but this is a kind of a synthesis of a question that I get in lots of different forms. And so it often goes something along the lines of, my partner's not meeting my needs. And then a lot of times there's this follow-up kind of question, kind of with that initial statement of, are my needs legitimate? And I was thinking a lot about this. I was pondering this the past few days. It came up again recently, and I got to thinking about how it could be a good topic for a video. And initially, I was thinking about how, kind of the end goal, right, is we want to be able to talk, with our partner. You want to be able to talk with your partner about your needs, about, how things are not going well, the ways that we're not feeling loved, not feeling met, not connecting in the ways that we want to. But the more that I was sitting with this, the more that I realized there's actually some really fundamental things that kind of me and y'all, the viewers, need to talk about first, before really that conversation can happen constructively with one's partner. Because here's the thing. In my experience, if somebody is kind of raising the complaint of, my partner's not meeting my needs, that already tells me there's some kind of impasse. There's some kind of way in which, that person and their partner are not able to successfully have a conversation, have, multiple conversations, where they feel heard, where they're feeling met, where there's a sense of somehow we're working on this together. Because otherwise it wouldn't be, my partner's not meeting my needs. It might be like, yeah, we're struggling around needs, but we're having conversations about it. We're trying to figure out how to meet each other's needs, but it's been a bit difficult. Like, it just, the tone of it is a bit different. The language is a bit different. And then especially when there's this question of, are my needs legitimate? Like, that is actually particularly telling. And so I think that's kind of where I want to start, because it gets into some really important things that, just are very common. So one of the things that this reveals, like, I know initially, like, we could think, okay, if somebody is saying, are my needs legitimate, our thoughts might go to, well, is their partner minimizing them in some kind of way? And that's a very real possibility. But I think there's something even more important at play. Not that that isn't very important, but here's the hard thing. Like, we can't change the other person. That's sometimes a very frustrating thing, but it's the reality. We cannot change other people. Not as far as I've seen, anyway. And I'm a therapist, right? Like, I'm supposed to be able to know how to do Jedi mind tricks on people, right? But I don't actually change other people. I help people make changes. So, yeah, this question of, are my needs legitimate? Like, I think it really harkens to the ways in which there's a question inside of oneself about one's needs. Like, I think we need to get curious about, like, why do I have that question? And not just stop at sort of the easy answer of, maybe there's ways in which, one's partner is being jerky, and is minimizing, is not responding well, not taking one's needs seriously, not taking your needs seriously. Like, all of that's important. But if that was the only thing happening, if we didn't have some prior wounding, I don't know that the question would be so persistent. Like, if we felt really certain of, like, my needs matter, and my partner's not responding well to them, then we wouldn't be asking the question, are my needs legitimate? We'd be like, well, I'm trying to figure out how do I navigate this conversation with my partner about my needs because my needs are important. So I think there's something we need to be curious about, like why am I asking the question, are my needs legitimate? Like why am I framing it that way, or in forms of that? Like why is legitimacy even a part of the conversation when it comes to my needs? Now, we can, consider, okay, there could be the question of, am I trying to ascertain, like intensity of need? Am I trying to like get clarity on, is this a need? Is this a want? Sort of that whole spectrum, right? Because there's degrees of needs, like there's a difference between my need for oxygen and, my need to, have some alone time or something, right? Like, I will literally die without oxygen. I might be really cranky if I don't get alone time, but I'm not going to die without it. So, there's all kind of nuance here. So I'm not going to try to get real like narrow in terms of like what's a need, what's a want. We're just going to work with sort of the broad category here of needs and wants. So, but I don't think that that's what this question is trying to discern. I think when we're trying to make sense of like, what level of need is this for me? I don't think we talk in terms of like, is this legitimate? I think when we're talking about legitimacy, I think that harkens to some kind of way in our background, usually way before our relationship with our partner. So typically this goes back into childhood, as so many things do. That some kind of way in our childhood, there was some gaps in our upbringing, some gaps in the parenting we received around certain needs, or maybe many of our needs. It may be very broadly, like with just needs in general. It might be certain specific kinds of needs, and so we learned in response to that to somehow cope. We learned to start to have a question of, okay, there's legitimate needs, and then there's illegitimate needs. And well, what do we do with illegitimate needs? Well, we get rid of those, or we forget about them, or we stop needing them, which of course really doesn't work. So we need to, I think this is kind of the first thing when we're asking the question, are my needs legitimate? We need to kind of get curious about like, why am I asking that question in the first place? Like, what's going on with me? What is it about my history that even makes this a question? Because needs are they just are, like, yeah, we can get into, like I said, reflecting on what's my intensity of need here, right? But like legitimacy isn't really, that's not actually really a part of it. Like, it's just you have this need. Like, this is where I'm at. This is the need that I'm feeling, that I'm perceiving in myself right now. The need or want, however, whatever word I want to use. So here's the thing. I think the other thing that's revealed by the word legitimacy is that often when we're asking someone, is this need legitimate? I really need for my partner to fill in the blank. Is this need legitimate? A lot of times what we're looking for is for the other person to say, yes, it's legitimate, and like, shame on your partner for not, meeting you in that. And so that's a really interesting move, right? Like that, at that point, what we're going for actually isn't connection. What we're trying to do there is we're trying to leverage power. We're trying to rope another person in to agree with us, so that then we feel bolstered to then go and kind of smack our partner over the head, hopefully only metaphorically, and say, well, so and so says it's legitimate. You should listen to me on this. And I think if that's where we're coming from, we are already coming from a bad place. And not just because it's not good to try to coerce other people. And that is what this is. That's really, we might try to dress it up in all sorts of ways and be like, well, but I'm the one being deprived here and blah, blah. And it's like, that doesn't change the fact that I'm still trying to coerce the other person. I'm still trying to somehow find a moral high ground on which to force them to comply. And aside from the fact that doesn't work, and also, let's think about this for a moment, just as a little aside. What if it did work? Like, what if you could coerce your partner into doing what you wanted? is that really the kind of world you want to live in? Is that the kind of relationship you want to have? I mean, look, I get it. Believe me, I get it. I know the feeling of like wanting so badly to be able to, make somebody be a certain way towards me, right? But the thing that I keep coming back to is like, yeah, but I mean, expletive. I'm not sure we can swear on YouTube, but like, shoot, like if it actually worked, if I could like reach into their mind and make them, well, then they're just a puppet. Is that like, that's not love then, like that they're able to offer me? Love is only offered freely. It can only be given as a gift. It can't be coerced. It can't be forced. So it's like, so that route doesn't really work, right? And again, I want to come back to this question of why is it not enough within myself to just be rooted in the fact that this is important to me, this need is important to me? Why is that insufficient? Why do I feel, for lack of a better word, the need, the impulse to somehow bolster this, Now we might say, well, I feel the need to do that because the person isn't listening to me. But that's kind of a dodge, right? Because if I'm actually really grounded in myself, I'm going to be very clear of like, yeah, this is really important to me. I hear you that you don't think this is important, or that you can't do this, or that you don't understand, or whatever the impasse is, right? But I'm going to be unwavering in terms of my healthy commitment to myself. And so if I'm going into this language of legitimacy, that reveals that I actually feel really shaky inside of myself. And so this then kind of harkens to kind of sort of the, kind of the other, kind of the flip side of this. So, and if in our background, we had these ways in which some of our needs were treated as illegitimate, whether that word was used or not, the feel of it was communicated to us. And this is not because parents are horrible, or every parent is doing the best they can. They just inherited their own junk, and hopefully they've been able to like not make some of the mistakes their parents made, and they've been able to love us better than their parents did. But there's still ways that they fail us, right? And this is true of all parents. So, and out of those gaps, then there's some ways in which then we, as their kids, and now as their adult children, we have these questions of like, oh, are certain needs legitimate? So kind of the other sort of survival strategy that kind of arises out of this, if we're not trying to coerce the other person, we're kind of coercing ourselves, which is again, I think, relates to the question of legitimacy. Why we feel shaky about that is because we maybe learned to kind of suppress our needs, certain needs, to deny them. I don't mean deny in a healthy way, because there can be a healthy kind of self-denial. That's its own conversation. But I mean like a yucky, like unhealthy, denial of parts of ourselves. To sort of suck it up, because that's common language we use in our culture. So these are sort of kind of the two common moves I see us humans make. And I've been guilty of both. Various points, more times than I wish in my life. And it always stems from not being able to be at peace internally. That my own heart isn't clear and isn't like solid, isn't firm around the sense of this is me and these are my needs and my wants and they're important. And so then part of what happens out of that, right, when we're not solid on that, we look to somebody else to be solid for us. We look to usually a partner, and then that is then part of what feeds and fuels this impasse. So what do we do about this, right? Like, okay, if our two main options of what we tend to do are either, coercing the other person, trying to coerce the other person, which of course doesn't work, and even if it did work, would be a horrible thing. Or coercing ourselves, which in a similar way doesn't really work. And even if it did work, to whatever degree it sort of works, it's not a good thing. But it doesn't really work because it doesn't really make our needs go away. It just pushes them underground, makes them have to show up in weird ways and funky behaviors and all sorts of stuff. Turns into bitterness sometimes. Not good. Um, and if our impulse is to like, want to like solve this through a partner, and that of course doesn't seem to be working, this is the whole reason why we're raising the complaint of my partner's not meeting my needs. So kind of where do we go from here? Well, I want to reiterate, hopefully I've already said this. If I haven't, let me say it now. Like, I'm not letting the partner off the hook here. Like, if there's ways that your partner is letting you down, that they're failing you, that they're not showing up, like, that matters. That's important. And that behavior, that's their responsibility. That's on them. Like, that's not your fault. That's not our fault when our partner fails us. Just like when we fail them, that's not their fault, But we've got to deal with ourselves. This is the thing. In order to have a constructive conversation around this, we've got to deal with what's going on inside of us that we aren't solid and clear and firm and kind to our own hearts about our needs. Because otherwise what we're doing is we're asking the other person to do double duty, We're kind of saying, I need you to not only fill my need here, I need you to also be able to fill the role that I'm supposed to fill of being clear and solid about my need. So I need you to do both. And that's not fair, and it's not doable. Like, nobody's going to be able to do that for us. Nobody can take the role in our psyche that we have to take. So this is a thing. This leads us to kind of an ownership that we have to take. I was kind of playing around with language the other day of like a radical ownership, which I haven't used that phrase before with this, but and I'm not totally sure what to think of it, but I'm sort of trying it on. I'm always playing with language, but maybe part of what's radical about it is that our tendency, right, our default is to like want to like just keep going after the partner and like, no, you need to do this for me, or maybe we're not that direct, maybe we're very passive aggressive or whatever, but under the surface it's like we're ticked. And we're letting them know, we're punishing them in some kind of way, or we're fantasizing about punishing them. And so it's sort of a radical thing to be like, okay, no, actually I have to own that I've got a need here. Which doesn't mean that there isn't a role for the partner to play in meeting us in that need, right? But again, we can't have a constructive conversation about this without doing some work on ourselves. Because if we could, we would already be having that conversation and we wouldn't be raising the complaint of our partner's not meeting our needs. Like, that's kind of thing. We would be saying something different of like, yeah, we're having difficult conversations about needs, but we're having the conversations and we're actually hearing each other. So there's this really interesting principle in life that there is something about our psyche, about our unconscious, that will seek out people, particularly in terms of partner selection, will unconsciously seek out people whom are going to somehow trigger our junk. Now you might have noticed this perhaps in friends, where you see them kind of dating the same kind of person over and over again, even though it's like it never goes well. Or maybe you've noticed that with yourself. I certainly have some of my history with that, where it's like, oh wow, I've got some repetition going on here, and it's not going well. I'm continuing to pick people, my unconscious, picking people that have certain qualities that they are going to fail me in certain kinds of ways. And that's been because there's been certain things in my background that I needed to deal with. There's been certain wounds that I needed to do more work in facing. Even though in some cases I had done a fair amount of work with some of those wounds. But I was not finished. And in some ways we're never totally finished. But yeah, there's this principle that our unconscious so longs for our healing, so longs for us to be whole, that it will kind of steer us, kind of towards the people who are most going to trigger our stuff. And that's not because our unconscious is mean. It's because we we need a chance to play it out again so that we can have a chance to do some learning and growing, and so that we can make it actually go differently. Where we all get stuck is that we think the answer is with the other person. We think that the other person holds the keys to the prison that we're in, but actually this is a prison that only we can get out of. Now, we do need help. Usually it's somebody other than a partner, because guess what? Like, your partner, they got junk too, and so they're playing out some version of this with you at the same time. And so you're both hungry, right? Wondering why the other person doesn't give you bread. But really, what needs to happen is you both have got to do some work. You both each need to work with a counselor or somebody like a counselor, somebody who has done this kind of work themselves, in terms of their own inner work, who can guide you in this kind of process. Because there's really something beautiful here. There's something, if we are willing to receive it, if we're willing to look and listen, these pain points, these places where our partner is failing us, where one's partner is letting one down, that is shining a light on past pain that is needing attention. Because here's like a really difficult truth. I have found again and again with myself, this is very humbling, like every time I see this in myself, and very kind of saddening, and I see it again and again with clients and with friends, that the very places that we can be most upset with a partner about how they're failing us, there's actually some kind of way in which we are failing ourselves in that way, in some form of that. So like for me, like I have some of my wounds are childhood wounds are like around abandonment. I've got a number of childhood wounds, but one of the big ones for me is abandonment. This kind of expectation that I'm going to be left, that I can't count on someone, that they're not going to be there. And so I've found again and again that in places where I was feeling really hurt. I mean, I've played this out in friendships, not just partner relationships, but where I felt like a friend wasn't showing up for me, in the ways that I needed them to and expected them to. When I really delved into that, what I always found again and again is that there was some kind of way in which I had been abandoning a part of myself. I had not been showing up for myself. And that's freaking hard, y'all. Like, because we really kind of just want to hang out and being mad at the other person. That feels a lot safer. Like, it's much harder to have to grapple with that, like, no, actually, I've got to learn to show up for me. In order for me to healthily advocate for myself in any kind of relationship, friendship, partner relationship, whatever context, I've got to be showing up for the parts of me. I have to go and find those parts that I've been ignoring, that I've been denying, that I learned to put in a closet, to bury or whatever your metaphor is, because of ways that needs weren't met, growing up. And that is the only way that then we can develop the capacity to have the kinds of constructive and redemptive and connecting and connection kinds of conversations with a partner about, like, hey, this thing really hurts when you handle this situation in that way repeatedly. Like, it really hurts me. Like, I really wish that you could show up differently in this specific way. We're able to approach them not out of a place of demand, not out of any kind of coercion of them or coercion of self, but with a kindness and a firmness of like, look, I'm going to keep bringing this up because this really matters to me, because I matter to me, and because you matter to me, and because we matter to me. And I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what's happening with you that's making it hard for you to hear me here. But I need us to work towards figuring it out, and I'm not going to let this go. But I'm also not going to like punish you or get bitter or those kinds of things, because that's really lousy towards me. That's not good for me. That's not good for my system. But I am going to keep letting you know that this hurts. And so there's more to having that kind of conversation. I mean, this gets into like kind of the nuances of boundaries and boundary work and whatnot. And so, which I would certainly love to do, a video on that at some point. I think in a lot of ways that would really benefit from some, if one of y'all wants to write in with a specific kind of story and request, because it's like, these kinds of topics are so incredibly complex and so nuanced, and there's 1,000 variations, and yeah, and so I think especially getting into thinking about boundaries and whatnot, the more that it can be specific to a story, the yeah, that has a way of sort of refining and honing, kind of being able to talk about it constructively. So, but yeah, I guess, kind of the big invitation from all of this, right, is if you are kind of in a place where, or if you have been, maybe you're not currently, but if you have been, or if you are currently in a place where you're really feeling a sense of like, my partner's not meeting my needs. And then especially if you're having that additional question come in of like, are my needs legitimate? Like, this is an invitation. This is your soul, your psyche, your soul, your heart calling to you saying, hey, there are parts of us that you need to come find. It's your insides inviting you to go looking for the little boy, the little girl inside you whose needs weren't met in certain ways originally, who learned to kind of have certain needs not matter, and whose pain needs to be met. And you're probably going to need someone to help you in this, because we tend, we pack these parts away for a reason, because they freak us out, because we feel overwhelmed by their pain. But here's the cool thing. You are way bigger now. That's the thing we don't realize, is that we get close to a young part's pain, and we feel the overwhelm that we felt back then, but we feel it in the present, and we think, I can't do this. And we're right to be cautious, because we do need help. It's not an easy thing. But we're also, part of what we need help with is being connected with the ways we actually have more emotional resources in the present, most likely. For most of us, like, just by virtue of being an adult, there's more capacity. And then especially if we reach out to a counselor, if we have someone walking with us who has their own capacity, right, who's been doing their own inner work. This is part of what makes for a good counselor, is somebody who does their own inner work. They're facing their own crap. So if we have someone like that, right, we have them, they're helping us learn the ways that we actually have ourselves more than we thought. And together, the two of you can do this work. You can go back and you can find that little one, and you can help them experience that they matter. And that's what's going to help you to know more clearly that you matter in the here and now. Because the act of going back to find the lost parts of us, the abandoned parts of us, the hurting parts of us, it's important for those parts, right? Because those parts deserve to be found, like, they matter. But it's also, the very act of it is building the muscles. It's an active act of saying, I matter. I'm investing this time and energy and emotion, and I'm doing this scary thing of like going back and meeting my insides, meeting this part of me and bringing them into the present. And I'm doing that again and again and again, because this is not a one and done thing. This is hard work. Just spoilers. But the act of doing that action over and over, it's reinforcing to me that I matter to myself, because I'm like putting a lot of effort into this. Like, I'm putting a lot of energy into this. And you are worth it. You really, really are. Each of us is. Regardless of what we've been taught, regardless of what we've internalized, out of our backgrounds, what we've unconsciously chosen to continue to believe, and like sort of made choices in our life that reinforce that, like, we are worth it. So like I said, there's so much complexity to this. There's so many things I haven't touched on. I'm sure there's so many ways that I've put all this imperfectly, and things that I've missed, or things that may be confusing or whatever. I would encourage you to, if you need to rewatch the video a few times, try to like make sense of different things, but also especially to really think about reaching out to a counselor. If this is resonating, if this is stirring up things in you, if you're feeling emotion, think about reaching out to someone. There'll be a link in the description about for a guide that I've written on choosing a counselor. And yeah, I hope that, and if yeah, I hope that you'll move in that direction. And if you have a counselor, obviously, then talk to them about these things. Say, hey, this wasn't on my radar before, but now it is. Can you help me with this? Because the amazing thing is we can change. We can grow and heal. And it's never too late. Believe me. I have clients I work with of all ages. And it's never too late. So, it's been good being with y'all. And yeah, if you have questions, certainly send them in anonymously at askshawn.org. But until next time, peace be with you.